Your 20s is the most important decade for building wealth, and the habits you build over these 10 years will impact your net worth more than any other decade of your life. So in this video, we're breaking down the 5 money milestones that you should hit before the age of 30, walk through the order you should hit these milestones in and why, and outline this step-by-step plan of how to hit all 5 milestones as fast as possible. I'm 23 and I've already hit the first 2 milestones, and I'm on track to hit the next 3 well before 30. So let's start with milestone number 1, because without this, the rest of the list really doesn't matter. The first milestone is building an emergency fund of 6 months worth of necessary expenses. This includes things like rent, food, utilities, or any other expenses you absolutely need every month. This is the simplest yet most important milestone most people never hit. Just in December of last year, the US personal savings rate was a mere 3.6%. That means that the average American is spending 96.4% of their income after taxes. Usually this happens because people's fixed expenses are too high. But that doesn't mean I think you should stop running the water in your apartment or sell your car and ride a bike everywhere instead. That really means you shouldn't be financing a new car with an average monthly payment of $748 or spending more than 30% of your gross income on rent. At an average savings rate of 3.6%, you'd be lucky to save up 6 months worth of fixed costs by the time you're 30 unless you're living off rice and beans. And most people can't. A study by Bankrate shows that just 41% say they could pay a $1,000 emergency expense from their savings. That's not even 1 month's worth of necessary expenses for the average American. If you're broke when an emergency hits, like losing your job or breaking your arm, it can set your finances back for years. What's even worse is that 1 in 4 Americans would rely on credit cards to pay an unexpected large expense. This is very alarming. Let's do the math on this so we can realize how financially irresponsible this is. The most recent study posted by LendingTree states that the average credit card interest rate is about 24%. So if you put $1,000 on your credit card and you could only afford to make the minimum payments on that debt, it would take you over 10 years to pay off. And that $1,000 emergency turns into about $2,400 by the time it's paid off. 6 months worth of fixed costs is the perfect amount of money to hold for the average person, since it will cover many car repairs and out-of-pocket medical costs and can keep your head above water if you get laid off, even in a tough job market. But as you're saving up 6 months worth of fixed costs, you don't just want to build it in a checking account or a normal savings account. You instead should keep it in a high-yield savings account. A high-yield savings account earns around 4%, which keeps your emergency fund from losing value to inflation and even makes you a little extra on top of that. Once you have saved up 6 months worth of fixed costs, the second money milestone you should hit in your 20s is to get at least a 740 credit score. Getting a 740 credit score puts you in the top 50% of Americans and helps you secure lower interest rates on the future loans you take out. Paying interest on your loans is essentially burning money. You gain no additional value for financing a product or service with a 10% interest rate rather than a 3% interest rate. But most people cannot afford to pay for a house or a car in full with a fat stack of cash. And the best way to build up your credit score so you can get the best interest rates possible is by using a credit card correctly. The simplest way to properly use a credit card is by following these 3 rules. Rule number 1, treat it like a debit card. Never spend the money that you don't already have. If you don't have $1,000 saved up for an emergency expense, don't spend $1,000 on your credit card. Simple as that. Rule number 2, pay off your credit card balance on the same day of the week every week. If you follow this rule, you will mathematically never miss a payment. And if you do miss a payment, your score will tank, as your payment history affects your score more than any other factor. Even just 1 late payment will stay on your credit report for 7 years, which makes following rule number 2 even more important. Rule number 3 is to never spend over 10% of your credit limit before paying off your card in full. Your credit limit is how much your credit card company will allow you to spend with the card before you pay it off. And if you can keep your utilization below 10%, you will be seen as a much safer borrower and your score will increase. Following these 3 rules, I have increased my credit score over 50 points in just under 2 years. When I got my first credit card, my score was 713, which was in the good range, and now I'm at 765, which is in the very good range. And now I can get better interest rates on my future loans. However, the factor that has kept me from reaching an 800 credit score by now is my length of credit history. The longer you hold a line of credit, the higher your score will be, and I haven't even had my card for 2 years yet. Too many people undervalue the importance of having a high credit score. So let's break down how much money it can actually save you on something like a new car. The average interest rate for a loan on a new car with an 800 credit score is 4.88%, and the average interest rate for a loan on a new car with a 650 credit score is 9.77%. Let's assume that the car financed at each of these rates is the average new vehicle price of $50,000. The buyer puts 20% down and finances it for 4 years. With an 800 credit score, you would pay about $4,100 in interest, and with a 650 credit score, you would pay about $8,500 in interest. That's $4,400 being wasted if you don't prioritize your credit score. But your credit score doesn't really matter much if you're drowning in debt. Which brings us to milestone number 3, completely paying off your student loans. Right now, 43 million Americans have federal student loan debt. The average federal student loan balance is now at almost $40,000, and the average borrower takes 20 years to pay it off. So paying off your student loans by the age of 30 puts you significantly ahead of the average borrower. But how do you pay off your student loans early? Many people assume their income will naturally go up in their late 20s, and they'll just use that extra money to pay their loans off. But I have a couple problems with that strategy. First, your income isn't guaranteed to increase, and second, no 30-year-old wants to live like a broke college student just to make up for financial mistakes 10 years ago. Instead, the fastest way to free up money to pay off your loans early is much simpler. Measure your spending. One of my favorite quotes that I apply to my personal finances is, "Whatever gets measured gets managed." When was the last time you went through your bank statements and categorized your spending? Do you know how many subscriptions you have? Did you notice that one of your subscriptions increased in price last month? Most people do not measure how much they are actually spending, and that's clearly displayed by a 3.6% savings rate. As a general rule, your necessary expenses should not take up more than 50 to 60% of your take-home pay. If they do, then you have found the key issue that will prevent you from paying off your loans early. There are a few key guidelines to follow to keep your necessary expenses under 60%. First, you should not spend more than 30% of your pre-tax income on rent, and second, keep transportation below 15% of your income. Even if you are overspending in these major categories, there are much easier categories to cut back on that won't affect your lifestyle at all. For example, you could try shopping around for a different home internet provider. Even if you just take 15 minutes one weekend to call 2 different providers to get a quote, that 15-minute act could save you hundreds of dollars a year. Or instead of getting eggs and milk from Whole Foods, get them at Walmart for a cheaper price. Finding ways to cut back on unnecessary purchases will also help you reach money milestone number 4, which is to start saving and investing 20% of your income. Now that you have a 6-month emergency fund saved up, you can use that extra cash you are not saving anymore towards your future goals, like saving for a down payment on a house or investing to retire early. This 20% can be split up into any way you'd like depending on what your goals are. You should deposit your money into 3 different accounts depending on when you plan on withdrawing it. If you plan on withdrawing your savings or investments within 7 years, I would deposit that money into a high-yield savings account. Keeping this money in a standard investment account can earn you more money than a high-yield savings account would, but you could also lose a lot of that money too. Taking a look at the dot-com crash in 2000, the market dropped more than 47% and took 7 years to fully recover. So if you want to maximize your savings in a 7-year window to fund something like your future wedding, I would make sure it's kept in an account that isn't volatile. The next withdrawal range is 8 years from now until you are the age of 60. This withdrawal range could include things like putting a down payment on a house, and I would recommend keeping this money in a standard investment account if you want to maximize your returns. Your 7-year market recovery window has passed, so you can instead put money in an index fund that tracks the stock market, which, adjusting for inflation, will return on average 7% a year. I would be careful putting money into an investment account that you plan on using within the 7 to 10 year range, because even if the stock market does well for the first 6 years, it can always crash in the last year before you take it out. Ultimately, your decision will be based on your risk tolerance. If you plan on investing a portion of your 20% into retirement, you can begin withdrawing that money penalty-free at age 59 and a half. The average age that Americans begin investing in a retirement account is age 31, so if you can begin this process before you turn 30, you will be ahead of the curve. Investing for our retirements is one of the most boring things to do because it is so far away and it takes away our abilities to use that money today. Our brains are not built to prioritize long-term gratification, they are built to prioritize making today as comfortable as possible. Even if you know you should invest in retirement but you don't want to, you are just like everyone else. But that also gives us the opportunity to get ahead of everyone else too. The fifth and last money milestone that will separate you from your peers is to drive a fully paid off car. Paying off a new vehicle frees up about $748 per month, and paying off a used car frees up about $532 per month. For the average 20 to 24-year-old, that's roughly 15 to 21% of their annual income. This freed up money can completely cover the 20% savings and investments milestone without having to change your lifestyle at all. At the age of 25, if you put the $532 a month you were using to pay off your used car towards retirement instead, and made that monthly contribution into an index fund with a 7% annual return that tracks the S&P 500 until the age of 60, you would have over $900,000. Driving a paid-off used car instead of financing one could literally turn into almost $1 million in retirement savings. Goldman Sachs found that 40% of Americans making over $300,000 a year are living paycheck to paycheck because they are victims of lifestyle inflation. Because they make so much money, they feel like they can spend all of it on bigger houses or new cars and still be financially stable. But if they just kept driving their old and beat up Toyotas, they could end up with $900,000 by the age of 60 instead. So let me know which milestones you have already hit in the comments below, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Also, if you want to know which cheap cars millionaires are driving and why, I broke down the whole thing in this video right here. Thank you, my friends, for watching, and I will see you next time.